Welcome to The Joe Show, a podcast with insight and opinion on the information you need to know, with your host, Joe Blyan.
Hello out there, listeners. This is the Joe Blyan Show. I'm coming to you. I'm on the road. I'm here with my assistant, and we're driving to go to the Wolf Lake, the former Wolf Lake Metis settlement. And they're having a do out there. And as we're traveling along, my assistant asked me when was the first assembly of the Metis Nation, Metis Nation assembly I've ever attended in my lifetime. And I thought about it, and I said, yeah, that would be a good idea. How much do I know, and how many assemblies have I attended? I just recently attended the 90th assembly, and in doing so, I checked it out that this was the 48 consecutive annual assembly I've attended in my lifetime. I'm 76 years old, so that's not surprising. But I haven't missed one in 48 years. So, in saying that, I wanted to, I attended two more prior to that. Two more. When I was about 10 years old, and my parents were coming from Saskatchewan to attend at that time they used to have in Kehewan, Alberta, at the band, the First Nation Reserve there, right at Long Lake. They used to call it Kehewan. It's now called. They used to have a pilgrimage there. I think they still do, but there used to be a large Catholic pilgrimage there, and there's a big hill there where they crosses. I'll go all the way up, but I can't describe it. But they used to have this large pilgrimages there. So one summer when the pilgrimage was happening, my parents went there to go partake in the pilgrimage, and but I had no idea that they were also going to have Metis Assembly meeting at the time, because in those days people were not as wealthy as they are today, so travel was difficult. And while people were going to the pilgrimage, the Metis Nation of Alberta at the time took advantage of that and called a meeting at that pilgrimage, and the same thing they have done years after that in the Lake St. Anne pilgrimages. So at that time when this was happening, my father said, I'm going to go and listen to the meeting. And I said, who is he going to go to? There's a church. I know they give sermons and stuff like that, but I've never heard of people organizing. In those days, the only people you heard talking publicly were white people, government people, and priests and Mounties. I just laugh at the last one. But very seldom you've seen Aboriginal people, standing at the podium talking. As a matter of fact, I never seen one until I got to that pilgrimage that time, and my father and I went with my dad to go to this meeting. And they had it right in front of the church, and the podium, the stage was the steps of the church, and there was all these people standing there. They were Indians, but one of them was wearing a suit, and most of them were all dressed up. I remember for the first time in my life, I found out later on who they were, but my dad told me at the time, but I didn't remember then. It was later on in the years I figured out who they were. It was Malcolm Norris, Francis Joseph Dion, Felix Callio, and the chief. I always remember the Chief Blackman from Coal Lake, and Jim Brady. Yes, I saw Jim Brady there, and he was a rugged-looking man. He impressed me, and when he did talk, he spoke both English and Cree, and I think he spoke some Michif as well, because I understood Michif. A lot of us spoke Michif in those days. So it was very exciting to stand there. I was just excited watching these. You know, I've never seen in my life until then half-breed people talking like that, you know, and it really impressed me. And so it was later on the years I found who they are. And after the meeting, they had a meeting there. People were sitting on the grass, and there was things were happening on stage, people delivering speeches. And like I said, I was really impressed with Mr. Blackman. I think his name was Charlie Blackman. He was the chief of the Cold Lake Band. He was there. I don't know why he spoke, but I think he was a guest speaker or an invitee for that meeting. But it was very exciting, and I thought, oh, what a thing, you know. I thought about it later on, and after the meeting was over, they adjourned, I guess you would think, because and they started shaking hands, and I went with my dad, and I shook hands with Jim Brady, and I shook hands with Francis Joseph Dion. There was a couple of them I couldn't shake hands because they were just all over. People were shaking their hands, wanted to know them, I guess, like I did. But that's about it. That's after that, I forgot what this was. It was later on the years that I realized it was a Métis assembly, because they took advantage of these people being there so that they can have this meeting. And later on, I found that was the case. So that was my first Métis assembly meeting I went to, by accident really, but I was there. Hello again, listeners. This is the Joe Blyan Show, and here I am in Wolf Lake, Alberta, the former Métis settlement, one of the former settlements that was established years ago. And the gentleman I'm about to talk to today is the chairman, presently the chairman of the Fish and Lake Métis settlements, one of the original 12 settlements that was established, and he's the chairman there. Herb, you've been in the settlement pretty well all your life, I think.
Yeah.
And what, as a chairman, how do you view the settlements? Which direction are they going today? And what do you see in the future for them?
Well, currently, I think the settlements are in a quandary. They don't know whether to let go of the province or move in with the federal government. I try to explain it to my members as the province was stepdaddy, and there was some DNA testing done, and the federal government is the real daddy, and it's time for the real daddy to pony up. And the stepdaddy gave us land and entrenched our land through the provincial legislation, and there's a problem with losing the potential to lose that land if we just move strictly to bilateral agreements with the federal government. So we're having a quandary as to what and how we're going to approach it to work in a tripartite negotiation. And when it's a tripartite, then we have the province and the feds fighting really against the Métis settlements for implementation of things such as UNDRIP.
Herb, you know, there's a lot. I just recently came from the 90th Annual Assembly of the Métis Nation, and a great deal of comments were coming from the membership. As you all know, a lot of the Métis Nation members live in the Métis settlement, such as I. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of other Métis members that were at the assembly, and they were, I think, what I heard there, I know what I heard there, they were asking the Métis Nation what can be done to represent these particular members that were living in settlements, and how can the settlements and the Métis Nation come together to work on issues. You know, I don't think anybody said to interfere with each other, but how can we come together so that the government know that we're all Métis and that we're all going for the same thing? Can you give me a little enlighten me on that?
With the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation, there's two different areas of authority that we're talking about. And you know, coming from the settlements and living there, I don't believe that the Métis Nation of Alberta has the expertise in delivering on things such as infrastructure needs in the communities. Mm-hmm. So they don't have the expertise of years of experience of working with roads and sewers and they do work with housing, but not in the same perspective that we do. However, I believe there's a huge amount of things that we can work together as a collectivity, whether it's working with the ACO or working with a multitude of service delivery types of things that altogether we're all looking for the same things, whether it's education, health, child welfare, and right now for years there's been animosity between the two organizations. And I can remember, as you can, I'm sure, back in Stan Daniels' time when Stan said we can't speak on their behalf. And I know that one of my uncles, Gilbert Fayant, was one of the original signers of the Metis Nation way back in the day. He sat on the original board of the Metis Nation of Alberta. But we need to work together as a collectivity. The problem that comes in for the settlements is that when we affiliate ourselves with the Metis Nation, then we can fall under the auspices of the Metis National Council. And that's where the problem comes. Because then the Metis National Council at a federal national level purports to speak on our behalf, where Alberta may recognize it, and together with the Metis Nation of Alberta we may understand the differences, and they can say, well, you can speak on this. But the minute we assimilate with them, then we fall under that national representation of MNC, and that's where the problem is.
That's understandable. I'm just wondering if back in 1926, when the Métis Nation originated, the settlements that was the beginning of where the settlements were born. So, and it was the Métis Nation that initiated them. So, today now people are saying that, how do we bring those two together now? Like you said that perhaps they don't understand the infrastructure and developing a Métis settlement. What other things can you see that the two groups can come together and give some understanding to a lot of the people that are confused about it?
I think if we looked at changing the board structure of the MNA, so that we ensured that there was representation for the Métis settlements, and that the people in the communities could actually feel secure that there was going to be representation from people who were situated within the boundaries of the communities. And what people need to remember is that if you go back to the Hansard talks and says that the Métis settlements land was set aside for all Métis people in Alberta. Mm-hmm. And there's some different rules around which you have to live in Alberta for 5 years, that type of thing before you can apply for membership to it. But the land is for all of the Métis here in this province of Alberta, and the organizations need to look at development of a completely different way so that everyone can feel good about their representation.
Thank you. But one more question. I asked a lot of people this question because it's been kind of stuck in my throat since it came out, and that's a Section 9124. That's a real dinger, but it's one of the things that the late Harry Daniels afforded for us. He made the government cough up to the status. And how do you see that working with the Métis Nation? How are the settlements approaching Section 9124?
Well, the Section 35 and Section 9124, there's still a lot of question. I look at the federal government and the Supreme Court of Canada, and there's so many different rulings that they have and interpretations that they take of it. And to me, what really has to happen is that the Métis Nation of Alberta and the Métis settlements of Alberta need to develop their own constitutions, and they can then tell the federal government what Section 9124 and Section 35 really are, and not wait for the government to turn around and tell us what it is.
Thank you. Now that's a good response, and I appreciate that. I'd like to thank you, Herb. Turned into my podcast, and you'll be hearing yourself, and some other people are making the same comments. I'd like to thank you, and folks, those of you that are listening to me, my email is joeblyan1@gmail.com. So tune in and listen to the Metis people of Alberta.
Always a pleasure,
Merci.
Joe. Kinanda.
Hello again, it's the Joe Blyan Show, and just a former one now, talking about the first assembly that I remembered attending, and I wanted to talk about the second one I attended, and that one again was by accident. In the early days, I come from a big family. I had 11 brothers, and we were quite quite characters. We were always working down south, and when time came to go to here and there, we'd jump in our car and away we'd go. And we always had cars in those days. Most people didn't have vehicles in those days, in the 40s and early 50s. And then we started owning cars and stuff like that. And so we would drive to reserves and settlements and, go trying to party. We did party a lot. And one day while we were doing that, we were driving from, we've been around Cold Lake that weekend, and for some reason we went to the Elizabeth Metis settlement by just south of Cold Lake there. I think I'd have been around 18, 17 or something like that. I can't quite remember the year. I knew it was in the 50s. And late 50s, it would have to be in the late 50s, yeah, before, it was after 58 or something like that. Can't quite remember. If somebody remembers, any old timer, maybe they can remind me. But anyway, here we were, got to Elizabeth, and we had beers and stuff like that, liquor. In those days, that was done quite a bit, So, and then we went to this Elizabeth settlement. They said, there's something happening out here, he said. So we went and checked, but there was a whole bunch of people in cars and in wagon teams and stuff like that. And I thought, what's going on? But we didn't go out there. I was driving the car, so I was a little more respectful. I said, we're not going to go down there. You guys are all drinking. We'll go in the bush over here. I said, yeah. So we went pulled by the bush, and the boys went in there, and they made a little, not a camp, but just sat in the bush and bought their beer out there. But I was curious about this meeting. So I decided to quit drinking, and I decided to go over there and see what was happening. And there was these people talking on, they had made a stage out of, I don't know what they did, but it was covered up with these trees, It was made like one of those powwow things, where they made it out of wood, and they just used roofing, was cutting little trees and with leaves on it and covering it for shade and everything. Anyway, it was really, I thought, okay, what's going on here? So as I got closer, here was this big, tall guy speaking on the stage they made, and he had a cowboy hat on, a big black cowboy hat on. He was pretty tall, and I thought, what the heck is going on? He was talking in Cree, and once in a while he'd break into English, and I thought, who the heck is this guy? As I got closer and closer, and I knew a lot of the people there in Elizabeth at the time, so I went and stood beside some of these. I think it was my cousin, Mike. I used to call him my brother, because his mother was my godmother, Lawrence Desjardins, and later on became very active in the settlement and the Metis movement. I asked him, what's going on? And he said, Imamo, he said, Abitogussana, he said, the Metis Nation are having their assembly here, meeting, he said. And I thought, oh my God. And then I remembered the one I had gone to when I was younger, and I said, it's the same thing. He said, okay, so now I knew there was an organization, but I didn't know how it functioned, I wasn't overly brilliant in those days because I never had a chance. I was never exposed to it. So again, here accidentally, I'm sitting there listening. Again, I'm mystified. I'm just so interested in what these guys are talking about. The thing is that I could understand English and I could understand Cree, and it was very interesting for me to hear somebody, a public speaker, which I thought, how the heck can they do that? Stand up there and talk like that, you know? And so I listened. I was thinking that. Now, at that time, I still think, I remember Francis, anyway, Joseph Blyan. And I think also, because Francis had left somehow, I think he died around 1960s, anyway, 61 or 62, I can't remember. It was that time anyway. So it had to be before that. So, but there was other dignitaries. I think, if I remember right, Malcolm Norris died in the late 60s, so I'm sure he was there as well, because I remember quite a few of them, and they had a dinner there, and that was the end of it. I don't remember too much of that one. It's just that I accidentally went to that one as well. But I was there, and I took an act. I wasn't, because I didn't know what politics was at that time. All I know is we're organizing something, you know, we're organized. So that was the last one until 1971, when I decided to get involved, you know. And but in the 60s, no way, in the 60s as well, I knew quite a bit of it, but I never really got involved in it until that time. So from there on, from 1971 till now, like I said, I keep mixing that number up. It was 47 consecutive assemblies I've attended, and I was confusing the other two, and I think that's why I attended actually 49 in my lifetime. So I think that was the ones I attended, and later on I'd like to talk about the other ones I've attended. There was a lot of, I've gone through 12 presidents in my lifetime. This president, whoever wins, if a new one comes in, will be my 12th president, and I'm hoping that the change will happen.
You've been listening to The Joe Show with your host, Joe Blyan. If you have a comment, story, or a suggestion, you can send those off to joeblyan1@gmail.com. That's joeblyan1@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.